All right, so hi everyone, and welcome again to my audiovisual channel. I am Gabriela Handal, a draftsman and the host of this show, a conversation about art, during which I look for the meaning and purpose of both art and beauty through conversations with colleagues in different artistic fields. Today, I bring you episode 14, and I will have this conversation with Teri, an artist I know from Instagram, who works in the unruly medium of watercolor. So, Teri, thank you very much for your time and for agreeing to talk with me today. Please tell our viewers and listeners who you are and what you do.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Of course.
Really cool to be on your program. So I'm based in London. Uh, Around, I've been living in many cities. I lived in the States, in Pennsylvania. I lived in Thailand. I lived in Germany. Finally settled down in London about 20 years ago.
20 years
Uh,
ago?
20 years ago.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
been a while. It's been
Yeah.
a while. She's been around the block. She has. Um, Yeah, I would say I dabble in a lot of different creative disciplines. I just can't help it my whole life. So I indeed currently work a lot in terms of like watercolors. It's something that I've picked up probably about 4.5 years ago. And actually, the reason why is it's quite funny. I'll tell you, it's actually a really mundane reason. And I also have a lot of kind of like other creative pursuits and stuff, primarily in circus arts, where I specialize in aerial silks. That's a whole other fun ball game, but I think it does have a bearing on, I guess, my view on how I see art, creating art and artistic expression, in terms of like how that lens shifts whenever it's a different discipline. Um, Watercolors, yeah. So the slightly mundane story is that I used to do a lot more oils,
Okay.
and after I had a kid 4.5 years ago,
Uh-huh.
I thought, oh my God, like it's taking so much time for me to just make this stuff and like sit in a room. And so I decided I'm gonna just try my hand at watercolors again. And that's theoretically gonna be a lot quicker. And the irony of it is that I think now the style that I've developed actually is quite you do need a lot of time because it's about layering the different the different layers to create like a
Mm-hmm.
deeper kind of pigments, because I don't do dry on dry. But anyways, without going into all those details, it's taking me longer to make these watercolors than when I started, which defeats the purpose of why I went into the discipline. But I love the medium. I've loved kind of this discovering as well, on social media, people that are kind of contemporary watercolor artists out there of different styles. A couple of guys that I try and paint with as well whenever they're in Europe, like Brunch, who's an amazing,
Ah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah, watercolorist who creation and fine arts background. Um, and yeah, it's been a bit of a journey, but I think I've now kind of found my stride of like almost a full circle of the stuff that I used to like doing, which was quite like lots of little marks and quite like a lot of color and detail to build up something. Um, Going through the kind of like more loose washes, trying to blur things, lots of blooming, and then coming back again to let me get this really tiny brush and use it
Yeah.
every single mark on the painting. So actually, a lot of the recent paintings I've done it with like one brush. Also maybe because of laziness. Like I've got all these brushes that I barely use.
Yeah.
There's one chuckle brush, and I'm like, but yeah. So that's my kind of dabble in the arts, when it comes to kind of like painting and that sort of thing. And then obviously all the whole other lot of stuff to do with like circus and then a bit of music. Um, I think it's yeah, it's all part and parcel of I think expression, and I think without kind of coming to the conclusion of the program, about just trying to find something that's like authentic and that is why you feel like you need to create something.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not about the end goal so much, although it kind of is. It's about the process of just getting it out, and that's what I find like the most satisfying. I think when that happens, people can see that in the work, like that will resonate in one way or the other. You know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I've
Okay.
got I because I go off on a tangent, so Gabriella, you're gonna have to rein me in because I literally talk bollocks for hours. So you need to be stop, focus.
No, no, that was really great because you addressed things that I want to ask you about either way, which is precisely the other the other expressive, the other medium, the other outlets for expression, like the silks, the aerial stuff that you mentioned, and also music. And was there something else? Is there anything else that you say that you would say
Oh,
regularly?
yeah, no, that's currently it for now. I mean, most people that know me as a kind of like really crazy food person
Mm-hmm,
that does a
mm-hmm.
lot of like cooking, but I think I would see that more as something else, another part of my life that's also part of me. But yeah, I think that probably is the balance of things when it comes to the artistic pursuits.
Okay, so then the food part, because like you said, you also not only do you go to eat to lots of places, but you also often make your own food.
Mhm.
Is there wouldn't you say that there's any? I mean, you know, the culinary arts are called arts also as well. So like, there's you wouldn't say there's at all any kind of like a bit, even a little bit of artistic expression outlet for you in that case.
I think there is. I also, but the way I approach art, and I don't know, I guess it's an opinion amongst a sea of opinions. I I like an art discipline, or you want to call it like a discipline to me. I like it when it's got a certain degree of like technicality and like skills and craftsmanship behind it. I think for me, I really value that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that obviously art can be many things, and people also create art for different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's like that tension between like doing something and that connection and like making and doing something and like that having skill behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, than just kind of like a vomiting of like ideas all the time. And so for me, I think if it comes to, I guess, the stuff that I make with my hands, like if I make somebody a meal or I think about a meal, you know, where there's a little bit of a visual element to it as well as a kind of like other aspects, it is about kind of like thinking about, you know, things that are like, okay, here's the kind of the fundamentals of something. And then I'll leave a little bit of flex for like things to be inspired by. And I guess it's a little bit like approaching a painting where you've got a kind of rough idea.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of the pieces that I've done recently, which involve this concept of like Victorian floriography, so
Yeah.
the language and symbolism and stuff like that, um, has had that concept behind it. So similar, I guess, to when I make food or stuff like that, or I choreograph an aerial piece. You kind of got like a basic kind of concept in mind, but you kind of leave a little bit of room for expression. But for me, it's that tension between combining like I don't want to force the production of something,
Mm-hmm.
but I have kind of an idea that like evolves as I, you know, spend time with it. And so for me, I guess like it's very much like being in the present of what you're doing. Like it's very much a kind of like mental thing, but it's
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
it's like developing skills. Like I guess my opinion, when I think about like creating art, it is about, yeah, it is about before like you kind of like have, or the feed loop and all that. I feel like that only really works for me if you are in it, like you do these things. I think there's a lot of now with social media, a lot of people like commenting on things, blah blah blah. I feel like unless you do something, you can't quite like live it in the way. So I hope that's something that I can do and eventually start picking up new skills or new disciplines. That kind of like principle still holds.
Would
Um,
you mind
yeah,
repeating the unless you do something what? Sorry.
I feel like if you don't kind of if you're not immersed in a discipline, it's really I find it really hard to sort of see this world in which people like tend to critique things without sort of, you know, being there. Because for me, it's like creating art and like understanding it and understanding, I guess, to some extent, the criticism of things, you know, appreciating it. It's about like having the connection, the mind kind of like hand connection of like doing it yourself. And
Ah,
for me,
okay.
like, yeah, that
Oh,
same feeling
okay.
like food when it comes to, you know, dancing, making music and all that. So that's my thread, I think, one of the threads that
Yeah,
I
yeah.
have.
Okay, so then what you were saying just now about that, I mean that if somebody is, if somebody wants to kind of talk about painting or cooking, or you know, in order to provide any kind of feedback or criticism or just talk about the subject, they should have some kind of involvement in that
Yeah,
activity.
yeah,
Okay,
I
sure.
think, and I
Yeah.
know that maybe it's like controversial, but I do feel that because that's for me like what drives like me partly to make things is that there's got to be this connection besides just sort of being abstracted from it, that you actually are in it, that you make it, that you kind of understand this sort of like energy that makes people create art.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, but it's an opinion, I
Yeah, no,
know.
no, no. I can totally see why you would think that way, and I'm inclined to agree to agree with that argument, at least to a certain extent, because I personally also actually find it really interesting when somebody who doesn't know quote unquote about art
Yeah,
or doesn't make it necessarily. I still find it really interesting to hear whatever it is that they see or whatever they see, whatever they think about an image or whatever it is.
mhm.
So I kind of feel like, in a way, that I don't know, innocence, quote unquote, about
Yeah,
not knowing how the work is made has. Um, I don't know. I find it interesting. I actually find it interesting to hear a critique or feedback or whatever it is in the different aspects from different people, because like when I was in school, I found it really interesting to hear the feedback of somebody that was giving me follow up, meaning that they were watching the work as I was making it and they knew what I was thinking about and all of this stuff, versus another teacher, also an art person, but they didn't know anything necessarily. Like it was like their first impression without knowing what my intention was or without having given any follow up. And like, like a collector, for example, who for that doesn't necessarily make art themselves, but they do uh, look at a lot
extensively.
of art. Yeah. So I find it really interesting. Like they have, um, I don't know, they have just different things to say, and I just find it really very fascinating. And they kind of, like, the collection of those things make
Mhm.
a tapestry in a way that somehow kind of informs my work in a way more to me. I don't know, something like that.
Cool. No,
So
I
yeah, yeah.
yeah, that's cool. I think it's good. It's also like, yeah, I think when it comes to, I always get feedback when I've, like, let's say, done something with silks, and I'm like, how does this look to you? And
On the
it's funny,
silks.
yeah, on silks, like
Okay.
people who do aerial are like, all right, yes, that move and that move, that was a nice combination. Whereas if people come from the outside, they obviously appreciate it in a different way, and I think it
Yeah,
all
yeah.
has a ton of like validity and stuff. So it is very interesting to kind of like get all rounded people. But yeah, I think for me, like personally, like kind of the creating art and like the feedback and all that, it's just somehow it's linked to like somebody who does it. I feel like just more energized by it, because I think they kind of that little bits of that whole kind of satisfaction of what it is to make art, like why we do it.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not a human like survival need or anything like that, yet it's so important to our lives and
Oh yeah, for
overlap
sure.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, that, like, that's also one of the reasons for which I started trying to understand, trying to see if I can understand what art and beauty are, because there's definitely something there, and just because we can't, not that we can't, but we haven't been able to thus far, I guess, to find like a dictionary definition of either one.
Mm,
It doesn't mean, it doesn't necessarily mean, or at least I don't think it necessarily means that they don't have a purpose or a practical purpose or like something objective to them or something. And somehow I feel like that being so difficult to find kind of, I don't know, like, in a way somehow adds more weight to their importance. Like, just because it's not easy to point at what they're doing or what their definition is, I feel like that probably just gives it more complexity and importance.
mm,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, and I kind of, I was also thinking about the feedback aspect that you were talking about just now, because I feel like it really also depends on what the person, the artist, wants to do. Because it's like, if a person is like really immersed in the art world or something, then it probably makes more sense effectively to listen to the opinion of people that are also in that world. Because it's like, if you're trying to make art for museums or for collectors or that kind of stuff, like, it probably makes, like, it depends on the artist's goal,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, because I mean, I can totally, and now that I'm trying to like modify my own opinion about art, it totally makes sense to discern who you hear opinions or feedback from. It totally makes sense.
Yeah, and I think it informs like what the feedback is for you,
Yeah.
and a bit is kind of like the kind of I guess it's the identity thing, and then another thing could be also why are you doing it? It's for a specific purpose. Um, so yeah, I think all that kind of comes together. in a way, like I think it's difficult to make art in a vacuum, isn't it? It's sort of you need to kind of get feedback. You need to kind of like feel like you're doing something that is creating something that is leaving something of you that's outside of you.
Mm-hmm.
Fundamentally, that's sort of that's kind of like the drive like of me, like why am I making all this stuff?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah,
Okay.
very
All right. So this triad of artistic outlets that you have, the silks, which is the aerial stuff, the watercolor, and the music stuff. That you would say that these three, you turn to these three most often out of the stuff that. Okay,
yeah.
so all right. So then, what would you say? I'd like it if you went a little bit more into how you think they relate to each other, if they relate to each other, and I would also like to know what why do you think you turn to each one? What do you want to like say, quote unquote, with each one?
Yeah, I guess for me, like they're all kind of like outlets in different ways. I would have spent probably the longest time of my life doing painting, drawing, and music work. Like I had a background in like classical piano and dabbled in the oboe as well.
Mm-hmm.
One because my mother.
Your audio is cutting off. Sorry.
Gosh, okay. That's like even. Let me try and I'll hold it up. It's okay. I've got quite a lot of stamina. So yeah, I am peaceful. I would say like I spent the longest time doing kind of like more the art and music stuff. And for me it's just always been more of an outlet. Like I think it comes back to there's this weird tension between I'm creating it because I need to, but also trying to understand where it finds its place because I want to some kind of footprint of myself, of my identity in my work. And in a way, like in the very kind of like grandiose moments, it's kind of like this is my legacy type of thing. This is kind of like I'm creating like what is important to me, like what I've seen and kind of what I observe and the kind of stuff that like basically is really like vulnerability and like nakedness in terms of exposing that outside of yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Link as well to some of the physical performance. Like for me, it set out more as a kind of like, oh, this is it's partly linked to like I think, you get older and you're like, oh, it's kind of quite healthy to have physical pursuits and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And actually, ironically enough, they give you so many injuries, like doing circuits and all this kind of stuff. That's like good for you. But it's kind of like then it's like, oh, then suddenly I start creating things which are it says something about what I find beautiful. It says something about also how well I can express it, and so it's quite vulnerable, which is scary, but it's validating in and of itself because it's kind of accepting who you are and like not hiding parts of your expression and identity, even if you curate what it is that you put out there.
Choosing
So
to
I
be
think,
vulnerable.
yeah, exactly, it is right because it's kind of like art is not like somebody's asking, oh, could you like just like I don't know, clean that floor or something. You clean the floor is clean, it's done, tick. But like when you produce something, me like that art, it's something that's could be something that's personal in some way or
Mm-hmm.
another. Even if you're doing, I don't know, like somebody commissioned you to do like an illustration for a magazine on, I don't know, coffee production or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing something that is to your client's kind of criteria, but it'll be something that you've personally stamped on, and you can't not have that when it's for me like something that's artistic. And I mean, I like that, but it's a bit unnerving sometimes as you go through phases. I don't know if you have like where you're like, oh, really, I'm really into this, and then you kind of like look back on your work and you're like, ooh, what was
Yeah, yeah.
what was that?
It's
Oh
like a
my God.
diary.
It is a diary. It is, and it's out there. It's like outside of you now. People look at it. You kind of want them to look at it. You can say, I don't care about what people think. I mean, I have those moments, but
Mm.
actually, I kind of do care. Yeah. So that's the common thread, I would say, and it's liberating. But it's constantly evolving. Like I used to, when it came to painting, I used to really paint a lot of portraits actually.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the pandemic, I just suddenly had this point where I was like, I really find it stressful, like looking at people's faces. So I was like, I'll turn my hand to still life. And
Mm.
I started, I don't know what it was that triggered it off. So I started doing all these kind of like still lives, like just like dirt basically. Or I'd watch like a little patch that I used to walk by every day 20 times. And I'd be like, you know what happens if I take a photo of it now? And then this is not groundbreaking stuff, but I like, oh, I'll take a photo of it when it's like after a storm, or, the everything is like kind of strewn everywhere, and just sort of see what happens, a passage of time. And then it started getting more into like symbolism. And that's when I got into this whole like, I did three pictures in this sort of series on florography. It was like researching on the meanings of flowers and how I could combine them in ways to sort of like use some of the traditional meanings, but also like maybe some twists and stuff on. The first one was about I had combined like these peonies that were very early season because of the weather in France, and so they came into season just as the rhubarb was going out of season. And it was just a very romantic concept of, there was this one week where they could be together, but they were
Yes.
not meant to be together. And it's like, nobody's gonna look at that and go, my God, wow, look at these ill-fated flowers and vegetables.
Yeah, yeah.
But for me, like, you just kind of like, I like this kind of like a little bit sort of subtle symbolism, and obviously it's very pretty and all that. So it could be commercially used for something else as well. So, that's a box that is always helpful.
Yeah, really.
And then I did a few others. Yeah, I mean, it is. And then I did a few others. One was tulips and artichokes, which was about the artichokes were like, I think I did lots of research on something that would symbolize like kind of passion and change. But they also had a lot of myths associated with like destruction, and it symbolized destruction.
Artichokes do? Destruction?
Yeah, there were some myths about destructive change. And then tulips generally quite neutral flowers, regardless of what color they come in. They kind of symbolize like unconditional love. So I was like, that's another bane of humanity, right? That we have the capability to love unconditionally, but we also are often very destructive beings, and like love is one of the most powerful forces, and that can be transformed to something that's destructive. So it's a bit more vanilla. And I think the third one was it was also quite vanilla. It was like fig leaves and hydrangeas, and it was about expressing vulnerability and nakedness and regret. And it was done in like different shades of blue because they were beautiful at the time, and I didn't want to look at people's faces. I was like, just sit here for hours and paint all these tiny flower petals here, and like, like. And then after I produced 3, I thought, oh my God, like now I feel like I'm producing them. I don't want to do it anymore. I'm going to stop right now and just wait for the feeling to come back. If you know what that means. Yeah. What that feels like. So that was very.
Yeah, I was looking at that. I was looking at that very series before we talked on Instagram, and it's really interesting for a couple of reasons. First of all, I've been learning about the pre-Raphaelites, and how they were in this whole Victorian era or whatever it is, and the Romantics. I don't remember the order right now, but there's a lot of that whole symbolism and the narrative within the image, and so it reminds me of that, which is cool. And it also makes me think of the visual language that at the time, the great majority of people had the visual language in common, meaning that everybody was familiar enough with the florography that you're dealing in now, and at the time also they were familiar enough with that stuff, and just all the generalized narrative of the time. They were familiar with everything enough that an artist could make an image and tell a story within the image, and everybody would understand just by looking at it. And it's because of the way information disseminates now, it's really very different. It's like for me, even the idea of even thinking of a common thread in visual language, it's like very, not that I'm like that cultured that I know every single culture in the world in order to be able to find a common thread that that everybody would have an image in common with which an artist could convey some information. And I just think it's interesting how the dissemination of information has changed that aspect of the visual arts. And I guess I was also trying to think of like what would be, in that case, what would be a common something that could be universally understood And I suppose I was then thinking about the Vanitas and the Memento Moris, and really the thing in common between those two is like the skull, like the
Yeah.
cranium.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know. At the same time, it's like because everyone's visual language is different. It's like I personally don't necessarily think about death when I see a skull. I think about the human body, the human figure, and how cool it is, and
Yeah.
just like how strangely shaped and interestingly shaped it is in this stuff. So it's like this all of this is like the train of thought. From the stuff that you were telling me, because I think
Yeah.
that is very interesting, and because we deal in the visual arts, and we're visual, and like humans by default are visual, we're like pattern reading machines.
Mhm.
It's pertinent to us. So all right, um, thank you for listening to that diatribe. All right, so what is art in your opinion, Terry?
Mm, I think it is, if I were to make a very high-handed statement, it's like leaving something of your personal identity to somebody that you want to communicate, that that may not necessarily have an obvious utilitarian purpose.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm. Okay, so
So it can encompass a lot of things, but for me, that's kind of something that you are leaving it to show it to somebody else, and it's something that's personal that comes from you. And then there's different medium, and I think that goes without saying, but for me, that's kind of the essence of it. And that's what for me as well is that's when you have good art, is when that really like clicks. And I can't click with my left hand, that was very my right hand only pull up the phone of it, but that's kind of when the spark happens. That's
yes.
like the spark that I have when I watch something. It might not be, yeah, like if I watch like a dance piece or something like that, technically some are brilliant, and you're like, wow, what a great production, all that, and it is art. But when you see something that is like really conveying something so personal, and um that exposes the artist from what they do, I think then that's when the spark happens. Yeah.
Okay, so what is the spark that you're talking about exactly? Is it like the moment the artist decides to make something, or is it that which they're putting into the work, or is it the spark that makes the work they're making good or bad, or worth making? Like what do you mean with this with the spark? What is the spark?
I think it's when you see something that like kind of really clicks, and it might be something that you see, and it might click on the spot, or it might kind of click later on when you're thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that for me, like, there's probably good art and bad art. There's technically accomplished art, there's technically less accomplished art. But if I come back to why I think at least a lot of artists, why they produce art, is because they just feel the search, like they need to. And there are people out there just, they don't, it's not important to them to make art, and that's totally fine. And that doesn't mean that you don't kind of, obviously, I guess, you don't carry that sort of, or transport that whole kind of like, what how do I kind of communicate something personal or have like creative expression. But I think like artists want to kind of like, they want to have a vehicle to try and convey something inside them and put it out there,
Mm-hmm.
and have an impact on people, whether it's I want to make them angry, or I want them to really understand what I was thinking, or I want them to think this is beautiful because I found it beautiful. I want them to like think about some issue that I'm trying to grapple with. I think all those things, that's what makes it interesting. That's kind of for me what would cover a lot of artistic like disciplines that at least I dabble in, and what what I find interesting, at least when I look at a piece of art, whether it's listening to music, whether it's kind of like, yeah, watching a circus piece, or like looking at, and I mean, like, a lot of my art is like, look, it's sort of like, it's quite illustration-y, to be honest, right? It's quite detailed bits. But I love looking at abstract things. Like I love textile art. Oh my god, I just want to like touch it. And I saw a couple of times for some reason last year, uh Ikshan Adams's textiles. This is a South African artist who he's like he has this work I think in New York in one of the galleries, but I saw it in the South Bank Gallery in London, and he does all these like tiny little beads and stuff that he recycled materials get woven into these massive like
Mm-hmm.
tapestries, and some of them are like 3D. They look like cotton candy from far, but when you go up close, it's all these tiny little beads. Oh my god, I love it. And I don't really know when I look at it. I'm like, do I understand what he's conveyed to me? Probably not. There's obviously a lot of meaning behind his work, and he's kind of like there's a lot of stuff about like faith and boundaries and transgressions and stuff. But when I see it, like I feel something
Mm-hmm.
because it's just I don't know. There's something that's so like in a way unique and textured, and there's some kind of energy to it. So yeah, I kind of like I think if I were to broad brush what is art across like how I look at art and the things that I kind of at least spend a bit of time with, that would be for me like how I would describe it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Would you say that in order for a viewer to really appreciate a work of art, they have to understand what the artist's intention was, or do you think it's possible to appreciate a work of art without knowing anything about the? I mean, not just without knowing, but even without necessarily understanding what the artist was trying to convey. Do you think it's possible
I
to
think
appreciate? Yeah.
yeah, I think it's totally possible. And I don't think it's a contradiction to like what I said before. It's just, I think it's possible. I think when you know more about it and when you maybe even are in that discipline somehow, there are different nuances to what you might see. And then
Mm.
it might be that it comes a bit closer to what the artist was trying to convey. But
Mm.
I think that without knowing all those things, I mean, people can appreciate art and sort of appreciate a piece of art without having the background, the kind of like the copy or whatever it is. But I do think like having the additional tools and information, and maybe an appreciation of the process as well, because I think for me it's also at least in what I do, I feel like it's linked a bit to like the kind of skills and the
Mm.
craftsmanship of I feel that that adds another layer of kind of like maybe understanding something and why somebody made it, and that kind of connection to the artist's like soul and why they did it in the first place,
Mm.
for whatever reason it was.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And that really definitely adds to the point that you were making earlier about how somebody should have some kind of experience in making something in order to then have like a more solid opinion or something on
Yeah,
the subject.
and I mean
Because
opinions.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
no,
was gonna say opinions are no. You
no,
go.
no. Go ahead. Sorry, sorry. Go. You're the
I was
guest. Go
gonna say
on.
opinions are like assholes. Everybody has one,
Sure. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
best enjoy in private. But I do think that yeah, that does adds another layer, right? In terms of like having an opinion that is informed and that kind of also maybe fully appreciates something that does take it takes investment in your energy and your craft and your hour or your time and resources to like if it's something that is I guess technical, like the stuff that you do. I mean, Jesus Christ, like we've seen that piece of paper become 3D. That's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy that it's so subtle, like just the buildup of it is crazy. So that kind of thing, just as an example.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
yeah. That's definitely. There's I don't know, a sense of kinship or a little bit of bonding in a way when I don't know, when like another artist looks at one's work like as an artist as well, and I don't know, like there's definitely more like a stronger thread of connection, I guess, between the two individuals. And I definitely feel that when I look at work on paper in general. I'm like, yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's like immediately I have a bias in their favor in a way, because I'm just like, yeah, you're working in paper. I like it, and you're drawing. So it's like, yeah, I definitely agree. Or at least in my case, it gives me a bias in the artist's favor when like I know the medium they're working on, and then it I don't know, like it I don't know, it like gives them points in their favor in a way. I don't know, you know.
Yeah,
I'm
I
just
mean,
trying to say I think I
yeah,
understand better what you're
yeah.
saying about that. Okay, so would you say there's objectively good art and objectively bad art? And if you think this, what would you say makes a work of art good versus bad?
I guess objectively good or bad, probably no, because it's so relative. Like in a theoretical world where everybody was 4 years old, my son's art would be amazing. But because he is 4 years old and he doesn't have like hand-eye coordination yet,
Mm-hmm.
it's I love it because I'm his mommy, but
Right.
it's like, so I guess from that perspective, no. But then I guess within frameworks, you can say this was a good this is a good oil painting, or this was an oil painting that's crap.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe if you kind of link that back to like, I guess the broad concept of like art and what is a good piece of art, something that like really, I guess, moves the viewer, right? What is it to see, right? Like what is it to see a piece of art
Mm-hmm.
that moves somebody? Then you almost kind of, in some instances, you're decoupling it from the framework where it might exist. Like some people just look at abstract art and they go, this is amazing, and they feel a personal connection to it. But it's like, somebody who has a, I don't know, 50-year career that painted something, or they just like the colors that somebody did on a Saturday, let's explore art class, and they just put something together, poster paints. And I think that because of that personal kind of like transmutation or something, when the viewer looks at something and the kind of I guess their history, what they bring to it, when you look at something, when you kind of like engage with something, that kind of decouples it from necessarily the framework where, okay, that's good technically, bad technically, blah blah blah, which are still valid, but it doesn't necessarily mean that would make a good piece of art, a bad piece of art, somebody looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Maybe that's, yeah. I feel like this is a view that if you ask me in like 10 years time, I might have a different answer, but this is kind of where I am right now. Because they're also like, like one of the figurative artists that I absolutely love, and I feel like he has a style that is like copied quite often, is this British Gibraltar artist called Christian Hook.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, he's quite well known, and he's lived a very interesting life, for personal friends. And his work for me is just so beautiful. Like it's that whole kind of like, it's figurative, but there's a bit of like abstraction on it. But it's not like I produced these works and I'm just gonna like put this paint there, and like, I mean, the style is so copied, but his work is just moves me. It's so beautiful. And I mean, I went to a viewing he did this series, and I'm not plugging my friend, by the way, but I went to this series in a showing in a gallery where he'd done this TV, it's not series, it was one episode about painting like the invisible things between people, like love, and whether you could actually scientifically like sense, with brain waves, if people had attractions to each other, and then how do you like, and he there was like these people that he'd interviewed that had like, this extra sensory, like they can sense like auras and stuff. And so somehow we tried to translate that to painting. And there were a lot of people there that like were in the art world. And then there were a couple of people who were not from the art world. And we sat there and we looked at the paintings and like just watching people's responses and stuff to the paintings. And that was like, this is technically amazing art. I think it's really beautiful, high standard. But also there was, it correlated to people looking at it and having an emotional reaction to it as well. So tricky question. But I think, yeah, that whole kind of framework of the, the technical good or bad, and that can be in different frameworks. To be objective, objectively good or bad is tough to say. But then if that doesn't necessarily mean then from the viewer's perspective, good or bad, or how good or how bad. Ask me in 10 years.
Yeah.
If we're still around.
We'll do this again in 10 years.
So like, don't let her back.
So then, do you think that as long as a work of art makes a person feel something, doesn't matter what makes them feel, as long as, whether it's a very small feeling of curiosity that just makes them stop, temporarily look, and maybe take a picture with the phone and then walk away immediately, or all the way to making the person weep or just angering them or something, offending them. Do you think that is what makes a work of art? I mean, does that make something be a work of art? Or in that, or also, I guess, does that make the work of art good? Do you think?
Yes, because it's done its purpose. It has left its mark. It changed what was there before that wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
It had a resonance in this temporal world that we live in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think that does actually, I think if I was, I don't know, I guess if I produced art that was trying to provoke people and stuff, and that's the impact that it had, then I would say job done. I've
Mm-hmm.
I've
Mm-hmm.
done kind of what I set out to achieve.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Um. All right. So then, what is beauty in your opinion?
Um, that I think is much harder to answer
Mm.
because it's so personal. Yeah, it's gonna be.
Because it's personal, you said.
Yeah, I think that
Okay.
one is it's much more. It just carries so much kind of like personal history, like what somebody would find beautiful. And that's much harder to kind of like. It's harder to grasp.
Mm-hmm.
I think it changes all the time as well, right? Like you may find I don't know, the smell of cabbage disgusting. But let's say you met somebody who loved cabbage and they ate cabbage all the time, and then they died in a tragic car accident, and then you would smell cabbage and you would be like,
Fondly remembering
"That's
them.
beautiful to me." Yeah. So
Mm. Yeah.
now I'm
Yeah.
really on a tangent. But I think that's so much more difficult. And obviously, there are things that are like, somehow our eye is drawn to aesthetically to certain things that are beautiful, like Mila Jovovich's face is beautiful.
Yes.
Come on, look at that. The proportions,
Mm-hmm.
insane, right?
Yes.
Anyways, a moment of silence. But there are some things that are just universally just aesthetically like you're drawn to them. But then there's so much of it that's like color, that's like personal. I guess people, as you go through your life experience and stuff, like then it becomes a lot more varied because you pick up different things, different nuances, appreciation of like what you would find beautiful. Like at least for me as well, like even from the more shallow things like aesthetics, like people that I find good looking,
Mm.
like over time that has evolved so
Mm-hmm.
much
Mm-hmm.
because I guess you notice different things, you then associate certain things with people that you've known or experiences that you've gone through. And so that whole kind of like concept of beauty, which is like I guess the visual thing that you're drawn to. So maybe cabbage smell was a very bad example, but somebody looks like a cabbage.
Mm-hmm.
Some kind of like like a weird hairstyle that you feel like, oh my god, like never again. And then somebody that you love and then has that hairstyle, you're like, okay. So something like that is, I think it just, yeah, it's hard. It's hard. And I think I always think about, in a way, when it comes to like creating visual art, like I think it's, in a way, it's harder to kind of like capture that idea of beauty, like because of all the things that the viewer might have in their mind that could color that.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, like you would think, oh, uncontroversial, here's a beautiful, technically very accomplished painting of like a beautiful sunset. But some people might look at that and be like, that is boring. Actually it's more difficult than, let's say, if you think about um, how do you call like singing or music, especially singing. And we've seen that on one of those, like, this is such a bad example. Now I'm seriously rambling. Stop me if it goes too far. But let's say a talent show or something, where there are all these talent shows on TV, and then you get all these people doing like, I don't know, like a dance troupe, and there's a circus person, whatever. And then you get somebody comes on and they sing a song, and it moves people. I think somehow
Mm.
that connection is easier with music in some way, especially when it's like when there's words and stuff, because I guess it's something that everybody does, right? That needs, or people need to do in general. Most people, able-bodied people and stuff. But whereas art, like visual art, that's different. Like it's a bit more of a, I guess maybe that's in a way, never thought about it that way. We all see, but it's colored by a lot of different things. And I think that the concept of beauty can be much wider than in other disciplines to some extent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely am inclined to agree that beauty is a little bit more difficult to, or might be a bit more difficult to define than, or I don't know, to try to even pinpoint than art.
Mm.
Because you know, thanks to Marcel Duchamp and everything, basically anything can be art, but then it's a beauty is like, I don't know, like almost the opposite. I don't know, in a way, sort of. So what role would you say beauty plays in your own artistic endeavors, if it has a role? Does it have a role? And in that case, like how would you say beauty relates to when you try to make stuff or, you know, do stuff with the silks?
Yeah, I think so I'll talk about the art stuff first. I think, to be honest, like my art is not controversial. It's quite pretty looking. Um I think what I like try and achieve when it comes to the sort of visual aspect of it is I don't know, I guess it's like little nuances and stuff like contrast of color. I really get like stuck in, you know, I get stuck into my work when I'm doing it. And I think some of it probably even gets a bit lost in translation, especially when I was doing portraits. Like I would be thinking an emotion of the sitter as I was trying to work on it. And obviously nobody would really understand that. But that's kind of like, I felt like I was charting some of my emotion, how I felt about them, what they were feeling, into maybe quite a mundane, average, you know, portrait that looks standard, pleasing, you know. And obviously that's something that if you get when I get commissions to do, like, you know, a family portrait or stuff like that, you know, that's nice. Like it's nice. And I don't think it's a bad thing. But that's also maybe because it's just the type of art that I produce, right? It's like I want to have some sort of like, now that I'm doing a bit of these still lives, but like some conceptual stuff behind it, a bit of symbolism. But effectively, it's nothing that I guess looks more disturbing or provoking in a different way on a different part of the spectrum. Like trying to kind of bring certain reactions from people looking at it, and I like looking at some of that stuff too. Like I do actually like a lot of these like symbolism, like illustrators and stuff like that. Like I guess I'm thinking of, there's this guy, I forget his name, a Ukrainian guy who paints all these like quite cheeky sexual objects that are like not really sexual in the paintings, and it's great. When it comes to silks, for me, like the beauty there is because maybe I'm newer in the discipline. Like I've only spent about 10 years in
And
silks.
silks?
Evolving a lot in terms of what I like to look at and what I find beautiful and pleasing. And technical levels, skill levels, I think, to some extent. When like my breath is taken away, when is it the connection is kind of breaking out a bit.
Yeah. You were cutting off a bit.
Let me know when it's back.
Your image was frozen. Okay, I think you're back. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Wi-Fi connection. I blame it on the storms in the UK. We've had quite a rough couple of days.
UK's moody.
I think, yeah. So
mm-hmm.
I know, very, very moody weather. A lot of stuff got thrown onto my balcony from the heavens, and yeah, that's hopefully it's gonna get stopped now. Yeah, I think when I sit on the silks, I don't know where I got maybe cut off, but I when I look at the circus stuff now, it is quite correlated to, at the moment for me, looking at something that has a certain level of like really technical ability, and like my breath is taken away when I see something that's like really high level, to the point that the body, the person, the expression is like a medium, and you need to be high level for that to really come through. So I do what I can within my means, I guess, then to express what I think is beautiful, you know, and it would be more simple things done well rather than the very difficult things done averagely. So it's quite funny because then it seems almost quite it's quite different from how I look at like kind of visual arts, because it's a lot more correlated to that kind of like the framework of technical excellence or whatever it is in a specific discipline, and then how that makes me feel, like in general, like I would say 8 out of 10 times. Or then I might see something that is like really moving or beautiful that is like actually a very little technical ability, but at the moment that's sort of where I am with the kind of performance side of things, as a viewer. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, we're close to the 1 hour mark, and I really don't want to like engulf your time. Uh,
I have totally rambled. Oh my God, has it been an
no,
hour?
no, no. It was no. It was rather the time flew by
Oh
because
my God.
it was
Yeah.
a yeah it was a very interesting, nice conversation. Which thanks again, by the way. um, so yes, I think we should start closing it out because of time is running out. So why, Terry? Please tell our viewers and listeners what are you working on lately? What projects do you have if you're working on anything in particular? And where can your work be found? Are you showing these watercolors? Are you going to show them, or anything you want that you're working on?
Yeah, yeah, cool. I'm kind of balancing out some of my circus gigging work at the moment, so I haven't got any big plans art wise. I'm working on some of my you'll see like a lot of my paintings that I have in series that make sense. I put on Instagram on
Mm.
Parfoil's font, which is a tongue-in-cheek reference to my other personal account with some of the circus stuff on called Sometimes She Flies.
Mm.
Um and at the moment, interesting things coming up project wise. I might kind of dabble a little bit into some of this like symbolism, more like figurative symbolism type of stuff, to illustrate an album cover for someone. So
Oh,
that's an
nice.
interesting project coming on the horizon. That will be outside of my comfort zone. So let's see what I get around to creating there.
That
But I'm
sounds
looking
cool.
forward to that as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like new challenges. Like I like a little bit of stuff that I'm like familiar with the concept, but I also like a little bit of a challenge here and there. So
Of course.
yeah, but that's that.
Um, yeah, I really like when music and art come together that way, where an artist makes a cover for an album, and I
Yeah,
don't know, it kind of really talks about the complex relationship between
interplay. Yeah.
things. Yeah, yeah. Okay. All right. Well, do you have a website, or just your Instagram accounts for now?
Just the gram. I'm working on the. I'm very very disorganized when it comes to some of this stuff, but just the gram.
Okay, no, Instagram is great. It's like practically become an artist's portfolio. So I think it's great. That's perfect. All right, so then, well, thank you, Terry, for joining me. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your words. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Feel free to let Terry and I know what you think of this conversation in the comments section. And also, I invite you to subscribe to my audiovisual channel because more of these conversations are already scheduled. I also invite you to like this video and share it with any and all pertinent people. And so, thanks everyone, and see you next time.